So I think it's very important to talk about and to inquire about intelligent emotional management, and specifically the myth of what is known as detachment, that is quite all over the place, particularly among New Age sort of mindsets, and unfortunately quite a lot also in a part of modern psychotherapy. I repeat, unfortunately. So if by mature thinking, which doesn't refer to the age, of course, but to the quality of our thinking, we refer to exercising intelligence, ergo psychological stability, of course, and coherence in thought processes, and decision making too, of course, and so on, then we can pretty much all agree how emotional thinking is in itself not really a proper form of thinking, and it rather is an obstacle actually against mature thinking in most, if not all, cases. So, to approach the question, for instance, what is or what will be the best approach to maturity thinking, I will suggest a good approach is to completely avoid motivational tips in the first place, such as something we heard and we hear a lot, control your emotions, and all of that motivational stuff along those lines, because it is not just rhetorical and therefore pretty futile, but also because it is impossible, since emotions cannot be controlled. We cannot really pretend to fight thousands of years of natural selection and biological evolution. We do have emotions, we are emotional beings. Pretending we can control our emotions like a computer machine will do simply does not work, and it is a lost cause. The whole self-help so-called industry is merely something that serves on the surface of deep thinking skills. Therefore it is intrinsically shallow, and therefore it is fundamentally useless. We can repress emotions the best we can, of course, if we wish, which is also futile, but that won't lead to, or nor summon any intelligent understanding within. Just an accumulation of more and more and further frustrations that will likely lead to some kind of burnout eventually, or even a mental collapse. The best approach I will suggest is to actually educate our emotions, which refers to understanding how we interface our cognitive information processing with our own emotions, or what I will call our emotional ecology. Also, what the premises are behind those emotions, whether they are valid or not, and whether those premises are instead shallow or simply not existing, etc. And also understanding what the quality of the state of our information processing is all about, regarding particularly the way we interface emotions. We should develop, I will say, the proneness, the propensity to see emotion as mere information, indeed. So, I repeat this. We have to develop the propensity to see, to comprehend emotions as mere information, cognitive information, which is what it is. And to recognize how having a feeling, for instance, having a feeling about something actually means not having enough data, cognitive data, at least not yet, about the contents, the objects, the subjects of those feelings. So to gather further data instead of just erroneously trusting feelings, or what some people will say, trusting in intuition. Easier said than done, of course, and no piece of cake. But there is no better and no other approach than that, really. It is a long way to go, and a hard one too, but not impossible. That obviously requires training in terms of educational training and personal development, and not just some motivational statements or clever quotes or miraculous self-help sort of books whatsoever. Being serious about all of that is a good process and a healthy one too, despite it is usually not quite pleasurable, is not dopamine based, and can often involve many frustrations. Actually, we can easily say always instead of often. Nevertheless, that is the way to go, in case we are interested in understanding our own flaws and issues. Taking things seriously is important, but that should be done, of course, without sinking into kind of maniacal seriousness, which can also become a very sterile and kind of stagnant mindset. In other words, taking things seriously should also involve not taking things too seriously, of course. And regarding the matter of so-called detachment and whatever that means, whether it be emotional or intellectual or whatever, such as detachment from emotions, a nonsensical mantra that many people suggest, there is actually no detachment. I think we really have to comprehend that. If I don't care about my neighbor or a person that lives in my town I never met and I don't know, how can I possibly be attached? But that is not really what I will and what we can and what we should classify as detachment. Is just a disinterest or not knowing. So there is no such thing as detachment. Detachment does not exist. When we feel we are detached from something, it's merely because we are not interested in that something, and that's it. So pursuing identity, personality-based ideas and or desires of being detached from whatever is merely a trick of the mind, because it's still attachment. Clinging to the idea of detachment is still attachment, is attachment to detachment. I'm not playing with words or saying something philosophical. It is a cognitive reality. And, I repeat, a trick of the mind. Indeed, it is a mind trick. This means that the wiser approach, instead, is to reason rationally and very attentively into the investigation we have to perform in regard of our own attachments, whatever they are, whether material, emotional, intellectual, mnemonic, idealistic, ideological, religious, based on magical or wishful thinking, romantic, identitarian, and so on. The list goes on forever. And yes, if we do not do that, then we very easily end up torturing ourselves over and over, running to stand still, or captured in a limbo of confusion and self-repetitive masochism, sort of. We naturally prefer the pleasure-seeking process, which is dopamine-based. So instead of taking care of serotonin levels, and indeed taking care of serotonin levels, which means being managerial, being attentive, being rational, being reasonable, having an inquiring brain, is not quite what appeals to us, because that comes with work and effort to develop understanding, thinking skills. Despite we are naturally wired, of course, to cling to dopamine seeking, or translated, to cling to what gives us pleasure and a kind of illusion of psychological security, we are not cats or dogs. The life we came up with, which has many good elements, of course, and many side effects, requires managerial thinking, more than pleasure-based thinking. Who can dispute that? Of course, pleasure-based thinking is also necessary, but I repeat, the priority should be given to managerial thinking skills, which means intelligence. Regarding the current COVID-19 situation, for example, the problem is also represented by the fact that, socially speaking, including media, entertainment, superficiality, and so on, we have been feeding pleasure-seeking for too long, and also superficial thinking, which is absolutely nasty. And now this is the time to pay the bill, metaphorically speaking, with this crisis that is unprecedented. So, to conclude, what we can see online, for example, is an ongoing attitude to cling to promoting being distracted. Just to play some silly games at home, watch Netflix, all of this stuff. I think that is a terrible mistake. It really is. We were dull and distracted enough, generically speaking, of course, prior to this situation, so why increasing non-thinking? I think we should rather invest this time to inquire into the quality of our attentiveness, which, generically speaking, is pretty miserable, so to implement it for the better. If we don't value that, then what's the purpose to talk about fake news, for example? This is a good time to invest into this reasoning, so to emerge from this crisis with a better or way better thinking, which is probably the kind of thinking we never had before. So let's think about these things.